Archie Harris waited in front of the brownstone on West 81st Street for what felt like an eternity, but no one came to the door. Eventually, he shrugged and let himself inside. Laughter drifted to him from some room at the back of the apartment, miles away. Kind of a funny feeling, he thought, to expect a party and walk in on an empty hall. But then he never felt at ease in Manhattan. The New York brownstones compressed themselves block by block. Their narrow rooms tensed towards a vanishing point and pulled his attention away from the present. He raised his eyes as he took off his coat, and he let the hall draw his gaze to the woman in blue. She stood at the end of the corridor, just framed in the parlor's arch. The moment he set eyes on her, he heard the scream. It sounded like the howl of a train at first, distant, but then it grew into a pulsing, terrible roar. The pressure built in his skull. He thought his head would burst. A joint in his jaw popped once, twice. Archie grabbed the coat rack to steady himself. He pressed his hand against his temple, and he prayed. This happened with ear injuries sometimes, his doctor said. The wailing that nobody else heard. And oh God, but it sure did wail. At last, the pain began to subside. Thank heaven for that. And there was nobody else around to see. Archie took a deep breath. The woman in blue still stood there, far down the hall. She tipped her head to the side, listening. But now he understood. It was Sallie. Sallie, that explained it. Though she looked so different, so poised and still. How strange, he thought, to see her grown up in the middle of the city and not walking down the silent, endless stretch of a Kansas road. He hadn't talked to her since that night at the barn, when everything first went wrong. Sallie stepped out from under the arch and walked down the stairs to the kitchen out of view. All at once, he felt such a surge of relief. Finally, after all these years, he could talk to her. Archie followed her down the steps. The howling in his ear faded into the sound of conversation. He hoped to find her alone, but a good number of people crowded together there in the kitchen. A woman stood next to the sink and lobbed insults at her drunk husband. A gentleman with a sardonic smile watched the couple's performance with obvious enjoyment. Sallie stood with her back to Archie, deep in conversation with a fragile-looking young man who blinked at her from behind a pair of horn-rimmed glasses. His tie hung loose around his neck. He had large, watery blue eyes. Archie overheard Sallie speak. "No, I think it's fair you kicked him to the curb. I feel just awful for his wife, but you're taking a risk and living with conviction. You can surely ask him to do the same." The young man laughed. "Well, yes. Too bad I'm still desperately in love with him." Archie realized with a jolt that they were discussing a lover's spat between two men. "Go home, farm boy," he murmured to himself. Over by the sink, the drunk husband started to sob. Sallie looked up at the sound, and Archie saw his chance. He called to her, "Sallie!" Sallie turned, and there she was, small and snub-nosed, delicate where once she'd been scrawny, her dirty blonde hair sleek now, her makeup pristine. "Hey there, Sallie." Sallie's mouth fell open, and then she let loose that glorious crackling chortle, bright and brimming with joy. Time collapsed around him, and for a moment Archie felt like he stood face to face with the little girl he'd once known. He remembered the way Sallie burst through her own life, ecstatic, desperate for adventure, and bolder than anyone. Archie half expected her to rush up and pummel him like an excited 10-year-old. But now she just stood still, composed, maybe even careful. There was a hardness to her now, Archie thought. "What the hell are you doing here? God, Archie, you look exactly the same. Dressed for church and hand-me-downs. Hey, I buy my clothes new. I work for the papers." "Do you?" "Yeah, well, I draw for Mad Magazine. Kid stuff. Can you believe it?" As he spoke, Archie felt that daffy molasses grin spread across his face, the smile that would never look right in New York, no matter how long he lived here. "Are you two acquainted?" the young man asked. Sallie grinned. "We sure are. Archie and I grew up together in Kansas, Cloud County, in the town of Laurel, just about 3 solar systems away from anywhere." The young man smiled wanly. "Right, well, listen, I'll go mope a little bit and let you two catch up." Then he drifted out of the room. Sallie grabbed a highball from off a tray and pressed it into Archie's hand. She took one herself and then led him deeper into the brownstone. The party rolled across the floor like a handful of dropped coins. Laughter broke against them. The golden light from the lamps flickered between the bodies or flared suddenly to full brilliance inside the crook of an elbow. At last, they found a quiet spot in the corner. Sallie sat down in an armchair, and Archie settled himself on the davenport across from her. His mouth felt suddenly dry. "Have you heard from Ramsey?" Sallie's eyes turned black. "No. Not since he moved to Chicago, remember? That was a year after what happened, right?" They stared at one another. Sallie looked hungry for something, but he couldn't for the life of him think what she wanted. "Tell me what you remember about that night at the barn." The request threw Archie off balance. "Don't you remember?" She sounded tense and focused. He thought she might break the glass in her hand. "I just don't think about it. It's not that I can't remember. I just don't want to remember. Well, I can't seem to stop myself. You know, I have this book. It fits into my pocket, and I keep writing about the barn. I just write out what happened on the night when it all went to hell. I write it over and over, Archie. I've probably written it 100 times, but I can't seem to get it right." Archie looked at his melting highball. "Why would you do a thing like that?" Sallie found the question funny for some reason. She cackled. Her laughter sounded almost like a sob. For a moment, Archie thought that Sallie might be crying. A stream of blood ran out of her eye. Archie leapt to his feet in shock. "Sit back down. Don't worry yourself. I can handle this." Sallie took out a tissue, folded it, and tried to wipe her own face. A drop of blood fell onto her dress. Damn it. Archie realized she was bleeding from her hands as well. He saw the blood bead under her fingernails. A drop of blood fell from her ear. He sat back down. "You're still sick, then?" "Yes, sir. I'll be all right in a minute. It's just a little episode. Just have to calm myself down. How are your ears?" "It's the same ever since that night. I still hear it screaming." "Gosh, Sallie, what on earth happened to us? How'd we get into a mess like this?" Sallie thought for a moment. Then she said, "Me and Ramsey got us into this mess 15 years ago, when we broke the table before the storm." This is Mystic Prairie, a Fantasia of the Old West. Episode 1, To Amplify Angel Voices. The year is 1966. The place, New York City. And Archie Harris has just encountered his childhood friend Sallie Lindstrom at a Manhattan house party. Together, they muse on the mysterious disaster that marked their young lives. Let's follow these memories back in time to Kansas in 1952, where 10-year-old Sallie Lindstrom is about to make some trouble with her best friend, a boy named Ramsey Sykes. The table was made of fused glass, frosted at the corners. It pulled bands of reflected light into the dining room from the parlor beyond. Shadows and whispers and a dim luminescence filled the air. The whispers found their source in the two children huddled beneath the table. They lay on their backs and looked up through the bands of light, and they strained their eyes to see, to really see, not what lay beyond the glass, but what lay beyond the air itself. They used the void as an empty canvas for their play. They tried to catch a glimpse of their strange, made-up world. This was their game. The game that they called Mystic Prairie. The game began, always, with an incantation. They called the prairie into existence with magic words and a chant. 10-year-old Sallie usually said the incantation. She knew how to put feeling into her phrases. She learned it from church, and she had a good ear for the sounds of things. Sallie gazed up into the glass table, and she spoke. You gotta look through the darkness. You gotta peel it apart with your eyes to the deep darkness underneath, and then you gotta look through that too. Do you see, Ramsey, the darkest point? So deep and shadowy and still, like the bottom of the old well out in your dad's pasture. Remember? When Archie tossed a rock in there, but we never heard it land? So maybe it's still falling down there under the earth. You gotta let your eyes fall like that. Ramsey stared hard at the table. I'm letting them fall. If you look just as hard as you can, you see a flicker. See there? It's silvery. It's glinting. It's a blade of razor-sharp black grass. It twinkles out from a sea of grass. You know what, Ramsey? It's the black stem grass of the Mystic Prairie. And then finally what? Ramsey whispered at last. Sallie sat up. The solemn, chanting child vanished, and a disheveled mess of a girl appeared in her place. A scraggle of dirty blonde flyaways framed her head. Sallie gave a little kick of annoyance. Finally nothing. You haven't noticed? The incantation used to make our game so real, and now it doesn't work. The Mystic Prairie feels like it's 1,000,000 miles away. There's nothing wrong with the incantation. You just got bored with the game again. I don't know why you need new fun things to try every minute. Hey, don't get sore at me. I'm not sore. Hockey Pot, the old lady calico cat, prowled up to Ramsey. She settled herself onto Ramsey's chest and she began to purr. Ramsey pet her distractedly. Ramsey was a small boy, sandy-haired, unremarkable except for the even, all-American regularity of his features. And yet, a pallor lingered beneath his skin and a slight rawness ringed around the edge of his mouth. Ramsey stared down his nose at Sallie, like he knew so much better. We're getting too old for let's pretend. It's probably just that. Sallie looked delighted. You agree with me, you sourpuss. You just don't want to admit it. You know what? We need a new incantation. Or maybe something stronger. We need to feel it. She thought for a moment. Oh, Ramsey, do you remember that antique saber I stole from the bric-a-brac? It's at the barn with all our other treasure. We can use that instead of a new incantation. How? We'll just slide our fingers down the sharp edge of the sword, and we'll imagine we're running our fingers through the sharp Mystic Prairie grass. Even if we bleed, we'll at least be feeling it. Sallie closed her eyes and ran her hand across the invisible blade. We can use that instead of a new incantation. Ramsey's face twisted up. No, I'm not going to cut my fingers. We shouldn't do that. We'll get blood-borne pathogens. We won't. Listen here. What we do has to hurt or else it won't really stick. Pain is really convincing. The prairie will feel more real if it stings a little bit. It doesn't have to hurt, Ramsey replied. He stroked Hockey Pot nervously. It does too. Fires, needles, Tabasco sauce. I could take it all, I bet, if I really tried. A sword isn't any different. Sallie's voice got louder and louder. This is gonna work. I can tell it will. It's called a blood sacrifice. You know, sometimes you gotta sacrifice a little something to get what you need. That's just how things are. No, it's not. Yeah, it is too. If you want something special, you have to give something special. Shh, Ramsey said, eyes wide. Look. Ramsey gazed down the length of the dining room into the parlor beyond. His mother sprawled asleep there on one of the plastic-covered sofas, her glasses askew, smeared lipstick too loud in the afternoon quiet. At the sound of Sallie's voice, the woman shifted about and groaned slightly. Sallie clamped a hand over her mouth. Ramsey's mother settled and grew quiet again. Ramsey turned to Sallie, furious. We're lucky she didn't hear. You better stop that talk about blood rituals and sacrifice. Mother already thinks we're doing witchcraft. She's still asleep. We're all right. And witchcraft or not, I think a sacrifice is still a mighty fine idea. Ramsey scowled. Stop running on impulse and listen to me. There are plenty of rituals that don't hurt. Why can't you educate yourself for once? I educate myself plenty. You don't even read the articles in National Geographic. You just look at the pictures. But I've read about all kinds of rituals we can do. Fine, pick a ritual you've read about then. Ramsey thought for a moment. He ran his finger down the bridge of Hockey Pot's nose. We'll hold our breath. The closer we get to passing out, the closer we get to the prairie. We'll do the incantation too, but silent. We'll just say it in our heads. Sallie grinned. The whites of her eyes glinted in the low light. Waves of enthusiasm began to pour out of her, as though her body could not contain her own fizzing excitement. You're an amazing genius. You are the smartest boy on earth. That is such a good idea. Ramsey looked at Sallie's smile and he blinked against it, like the sun had rolled out of the clouds to pour light all over his face. Then he grinned too. Yeah, guess so. All right, we'll do that then. On 3, okay? 1, 2, 3. Ramsey took a breath. Sallie took a breath. They stared up through the table. In the shadowy refractions in the glass above their heads, the children tried to glimpse the endless sunlight, the black stem prairie vista, the fearsome monsters and their hunt. Ramsey felt his brain constrict with that urge to breathe. I can't do it. And then for one impossible moment, he thought he saw the grass. It waved and rippled into being against the shadows of the table. The sight shocked him so much he took a breath. Hockey Pot hissed on his chest and then ran away. Ramsey gasped. I really saw something for a minute. He glanced over at Sallie. Sallie stared up at the table, eyes wide, pupils dilated, cheeks bulging with her held breath, her face red. Too red. Sallie, stop. We're done playing. But Sallie refused to breathe. Stop. Ramsey saw a darkness bloom across the white of Sallie's right eye. It was blood, a burst vessel. She looked determined, face puffed with effort. Sallie! A loud, splintering shatter broke through the quiet. A hairline crack ran down the center of the table. Sallie heaved in great breaths of air. She panted and stared up at the crack. Then she turned to Ramsey. You're gonna get in trouble. The streets in the town of Laurel all had names, but nobody ever put those names to use. People spoke of places, not addresses. Sue Metcalf's place, the Johnsons' place. Town extended for 10 blocks up and 8 blocks out. On Main Street, the flat facades of the buildings looked like Wild West storefronts with the wild all tamed and gone. Caldwell's soda fountain stood at one end of the main road. An eternally closed Christian Science reading room stood at the other. Churches inflected the horizon. They reared up on street corners, loomed along the main thoroughfare, their denominational subtleties writ across every sign: Baptist, Pentecostal, Nazarene. At the furthest edge of Laurel, a curio emporium inhabited the town's old agricultural auction house. Beyond this island of human life, the vacant, eternal fields encircled the town on every side. The Kansas hollowness spread and spread forever. Sallie gazed out at the town of Laurel through the big plate glass window of Caldwell's soda fountain. It was a Monday, the day after the incident with the table. Cotton ball clouds drifted over the street. Those few folks out and about made the town feel emptier and quieter than ever. What a place! What a dried up, dreary old place, Sallie thought. When she sat and really meditated on the town of Laurel, her whole body went limp with such a bone-deep dismay and weariness. Laurel had once been an exciting, blood-soaked frontier settlement filled with murderers and alcoholics and loose ladies. She knew it had. Now nothing happened in the town of Laurel. It just stayed to its own steady pace, slow and even as the 400-day clock Mrs. Caldwell kept in the window. That's why they had to play the game. Because the town was nothing, a town to leave, but they couldn't leave it, so they had to change it, even if they only ever changed it in their heads. But it was only make-believe, or at least she'd thought so till now. Sallie pulled her attention from the window and back to the clamor of the soda fountain. The 5 kids in the Mystic Prairie gang jostled together around the biggest table in Caldwell's. Ramsey sat next to Sallie. Then there was gangling, mild Archie, who kept the peace, little Tom, the youngest, and then Laurel. Laurel, who shared the same name as the town. Laurel, the only other girl in the group. Laurel, who barely ever spoke. Ramsey just droned on and on about the ritual and the broken table. Except he wasn't telling it right, Sallie thought. Ramsey never told a story right. He talked slow and hesitant, and he didn't put passion into any of the best parts. Little Tom looked bored. They don't understand how important this is, Sallie thought. This whole time we were playing make-believe, but Ramsey and I almost got all the way to the Mystic Prairie. Ramsey fiddled with his milkshake straw. My pop said there was just a flaw in the glass, like it was under pressure or something. Sallie wriggled with such frustrated annoyance that she found herself half slipping off the bench. She braced one patent leather shoe against the jukebox next to the table, and she tried to shout some life into his tale. No, there wasn't any kind of flaw in that table, Ramsey. I think we did it with our minds. I think we really did it. It was psychic energy, and it was amazing. Well, my pop said it was a flaw. Ramsey finished his milkshake and said, I'm having another one. He wore such a superior, princely expression on his face. Sallie wanted to throttle him. Well, then what about this? She pointed to her eye. It still has blood in it. What's that supposed to prove? Archie, his elbows splayed across the table, tried to soothe them both. Gee, Ramsey, I think the real mystery is, how can a boy your size hold that much milkshake? Little Tom piped up. And he's got a pocket full of candy on top, I'll bet. It was true. Ramsey seemed to eat nothing but peanut rounders and Buckeyes. Valamilk candy cups were his particular passion. He had the sweetest tooth of anyone in town. Sallie groaned. This is important. I really think we almost made the Mystic Prairie come true. I don't think it's just pretend this time. Silence followed this statement. Then Ramsey grinned at her, a slow, sly grin. I made it real already, he said. Ramsey reached into his school bag and drew out a scroll of paper. The children all crowded around. He pulled it open to reveal an illustration done in charcoal. Archie whistled low. Golly! Ramsey's illustration captured the Mystic Prairie in the depths of a storm. 5 figures, saturated with shadow, wet with rain, struggled across the expanse. Sallie couldn't see them clearly, but she knew it must be the 5 of them, their gang, but reimagined on the page as 5 Mystic Prairie settlers bound for adventure. They hurried towards the barn at the far side of the illustration. It was their barn, Sallie knew, the Mystic Prairie hideout where they kept all their treasures. A pale light glowed out from the clouds. In the center of the sky, Sallie saw a crack in the firmament, like a missing shard of air. It was the exact shape of the crack in the table. Sallie could hardly contain herself. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Mighty fine job you did there, Ramsey, Archie said. Ramsey glowed at their praise. Laurel reached out a slim hand and she flattened a curl in the corner. Incredible, she murmured. And look at this. Ramsey lifted his drawing up to the plate glass window. The illustration slotted into the scene outside perfectly. The street melted into the prairie, and the prairie melted into the street. It looked like a doorway to another world, right in the middle of Caldwell's. Ramsey grinned. It only works if you sit in our spot, just here. Ramsey, how did you make it line up like that? Laurel leaned in to look at the detail. A shadow passed over the girl's face. Sallie noticed. Sallie always noticed. Every time Sallie found herself in Laurel's presence, she devoted a small, important part of her brain to noticing Laurel's every move and expression. And now Laurel looked sad and hurt. Laurel had huge brown eyes and heavy black hair that she wore plaited in a braid down her back. She was tall, taller than all the other children, and slender to the point of frailty. To the adults, she seemed a quiet, gentle creature, wise beyond her years, their teacher, Mrs. Runcie, said. But Sallie recognized the girl's mystery. Laurel had moved into town from out of nowhere the year before. When she first arrived at school, everyone laughed and laughed at the coincidence. You're Laurel in the town of Laurel? Laurel in Laurel? It just tickled everyone. But Laurel didn't seem to mind. I guess I'm meant to be here, she said. No one could figure out her story. And there was a story. Sallie had overheard plenty of speculation. A few folks in town called Laurel the little Mexican girl. But Sallie thought that was stupid. Laurel was American, clearly. But it was also clear that she wasn't any kind of relation to the people she lived with, Mr. and Mrs. Lambert, who were both white. Everyone wanted to know how Laurel had ended up in their care. But Laurel slipped the noose of every question that came her way. Quiet, careful, unreadable. Whenever Laurel did decide to talk, she spoke in a genteel voice, more like a movie actress than a little girl. And she always said something interesting. And now she stared at the picture with a worried crease in her brow. You left us out when you were playing under the table. You tried to make the Mystic Prairie real without the rest of us. Silence fell. Ramsey stared at Laurel, suddenly unsure. It was just an experiment. Sallie tried to explain. We didn't mean to make it real. We don't even have the whole place planned out yet." Laurel studied them both in her calm, quiet way, but Sallie could tell she didn't really believe them. "Would you ever leave and go to the prairie without us? Without me?" "No, we would never try to do that by ourselves. You already did." Laurel stared hard at Sallie. Sallie dropped her eyes. "Will you look at that?" a child at the next table exclaimed. A group of kids crowded around him. Mrs. Caldwell spoke from behind the counter. "Those clouds, they don't look right." Sallie turned her attention back to the window. She saw again the sunny street, the vacant town, but the cotton ball clouds up above had bubbled into odd, pewter-colored blisters, like sores on the surface of the air. The sky glowed with a hysterical green light. Sallie slid off the bench. As if in a trance, she walked out of the shop. The rest of the gang followed after. The moment she stepped onto the road, all trace of the sunlight faded away. Sallie turned slowly, and she gazed down the silent street. She'd never seen the town of Laurel look quite so odd, quiet, frozen, like a whole other world almost. The clouds to the west bloated down lower than all the others. They seemed almost to vibrate, alive with air and tension. They reminded her of the rotund wine jugs that her dad used to bring home, the big ones that moaned in pain when she blew across their necks. Sallie shivered, though she didn't feel cold. The trees shivered with her. And in the distance, down the long, long stretch of street, she saw Mr. Singer's red truck barreling into town, a speck beneath the tower of the storm. "I think we gotta get below ground," Ramsey murmured. Sallie took a step towards the approaching truck. It grew larger and larger in the distance. "Not yet," Sallie said. Mr. Singer sped through Laurel. He stopped the truck in the center of the road. Then he blew his horn 3 times and leaped out without bothering to close the door.
"It's coming!"
Mrs. Caldwell burst out of the shop.
"You saw one?" "No, but those clouds are churning the way I saw them do it 3 years back in McPherson."
He pointed at the sky. Mrs. Caldwell pursed her lips in annoyance.
"You're only supposed to warn people if you see one, Dan. You're scaring my patrons."
Laurel looked confused. "See what? What's going on?" "Twister," Sallie said. "Maybe, or maybe not." Fat drops of rain began to spatter on the pavement. The wind picked up. Waves of agitation passed through the distant fields. Sallie's hair began to lash against her face. The whole earth surged alive around them. And then, out beyond the town, a slow, rotating fissure of darkness lowered itself from the sky. Sallie gasped. The clouds spiraled down from the heavens, but then the earth, it wrenched itself up towards the sky. The ground and the sky met above the horizon and fused together. Darkness drained into the twister from bottom to top. A long, thin, jagged crack of a funnel cut across the field. It whipped towards the town of Laurel. Mr. Singer was wild-eyed.
"I'm gonna knock on some doors. You get these kids into the cellar."
Ramsey tugged on Sallie's arm. "Let's go." But Sallie didn't move. For one frozen, impossible instant, the twister took the shape of the crack in Ramsey's drawing. The crack in the table.
"Ramsey, did you see that? Now, come on. I won't let it get you."
Ramsey yanked on her dress. Sallie felt the seams rip. She relented and Ramsey dragged her towards the cellar. A teenage boy led a weeping 7-year-old out of the shop. More children ran around the back of the building. Mrs. Caldwell stood at the door of the cellar and she waved the children underground. Sallie counted off her friends. Archie, Laurel, Tom. She saw them each climb into the darkness below. She swung herself onto the ladder and started after them. Ramsey followed, his breath ragged against the cellar walls. The cellar smelled of earth and dust. Kids sat themselves down on crates of soda syrup. Archie, Little Tom, and Laurel crept to the opposite side of the cellar, away from Mrs. Caldwell and the other children. Ramsay and Sallie joined them. Laurel laughed to herself, eyes wide. It really is like the wonderful Wizard of Oz. Sallie was too excited to keep still. She grinned, her heart alight with nervous anticipation. Maybe the twister would level the whole town. She didn't really want it to, but then, well, maybe she did. She wanted something to happen. Mrs. Caldwell looked around at the children. I think that's everyone. She closed the cellar doors and secured them with a padlock. And then they heard the roar. It sounded quiet enough at first, but then it built to a ravening shriek full of hunger and hatred, as though the air itself wanted to eat them alive. Sallie fixed her eyes on the space beneath the cellar door. The daylight under the door flared orange for a moment. Then the light shifted to a bright white blue before darkness swept across the threshold entirely. The roar crested over the edge of the universe. Sallie screamed. She felt the scream, the force of it, leave her body, but the storm ate her voice and spit it out. And then it was over. No one moved. They could still hear it off in the distance, consuming, feeding. A blonde, pigtailed girl sobbed and hiccuped rhythmically in a corner. Mrs. Caldwell looked ill. We'll stay down here a moment longer, children. Just sit quiet now and wait. I'll give you all a free chocolate phosphate after. Sallie sat up. It's like that storm from your drawing, Ramsay. You think that we made it happen? Silence. I know we did. Laurel's voice had a slight resonance behind it, like echoes against a mountainside. How do you know that? Laurel drew her knees up to her chin. I'm not entirely sure I can explain, but Sallie knew that Laurel would tell them everything now. Sallie could feel it, the tingling edge of the story as it took shape between them. Laurel's mystery would break open if she just pushed the littlest bit. The tornado had dragged it out of her. I guess I made something make-believe come real once. How did you do that? Asked Sallie. Do you know about St. Katherine of Siena? Archie shook his head. No, we don't know much about saints. St. Katherine fasted to see visions, Laurel said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hunger for food mixed with her hunger for other things. It helped her sense all the secrets she couldn't see before, and then she experienced the presence of God. But that's just made up. Little Tom was a practical boy and could barely stomach the Mystic Prairie, except that regular old life bored him stupid. No, Laurel said, with sharp conviction. It's not just make-believe. I had it happen too when I fasted. Like you didn't eat? Archie asked. Why'd you do that? Another beat of silence. Tell us, pressed Sallie. Well, it started with my father. And then she began her story in earnest. My father didn't like to settle anywhere, so we moved around a lot. We lived as we pleased, as he would say. My father could convince anyone to do anything. He really convinced my mother. We've been all over the United States, and we lived in all kinds of places, even a train car once, and once my dad talked us into a mansion. We took care of a movie star's house for a whole summer while he was away making a picture. You just wandered around all the time like hobos? How'd you learn how to read if you never went to school? Said little Tom. Laurel didn't seem bothered by this question. My mother taught me. She always made sure I had books, and we were always moving, so I saw a lot more than you, certainly. She paused. My father would get funny ideas into his head sometimes. One night, he told us that he heard the voice of the angel Gabriel, and Gabriel told us to go to the desert. Jack from the docks and Muriel, my sister, and my mother and Uncle Sonny, they always believed everything Dad said, so we went to the Mogollon Rim in Sedona. Dad said he could hear Gabriel better when the angel's voice echoed against sandstone. He said that God built the basin there to amplify angel voices. And after a few weeks, with our car out of gas and without much food left to eat, I felt like I could hear the angel Gabriel too. I felt like there were messages tucked between the red and gold layers of sandstone in the cliffs. The scrub and pine trees sang to each other across the desert, like whales sing to each other in the ocean. We ran out of food around then, and everything got really strange. It was like I could go anywhere with my spirit, any place and time, I felt like. And I saw this luminous kind of web in the air. Voices called to me from behind the sky. I tried not to answer them. I didn't talk to them for the longest time, but then I got scared for my mother, and I called out for help. I screamed out into the sky. The sheriff found our camp 3 hours later, and I overheard him talking to his deputy. He said he just got a feeling of someone calling his name out in the dirt. The children waited a long time, but Laurel's story was over. "What happened to your family, though?" asked Ramsey. Sallie could tell that Laurel didn't want to say anymore, had maybe already said too much for comfort. Laurel shrugged and gave a little half smile. "I'm hoping I can find them again when I grow up. After the rescue, they sent me to stay with the Lamberts, but I was the one who called for help. I was the one who made the rescue happen, and people heard me across space and time. I had access to that power. It's the same power we saw today. We made the tornado happen." Sallie looked from face to face. She saw that everyone believed Laurel. Everyone believed what they'd done, even Ramsey. Nobody spoke for a long time. They couldn't hear the sound of the storm at all anymore. Beneath the threshold, Sallie saw a crack of daylight. Sallie smiled. "You're right. We made the tornado happen. We can make anything happen. We could make the Mystic Prairie come real." Mystic Prairie is a third Cosmonaut production, written and produced by Katherine Jameson and McKinley Baker. Performed by Katherine Jameson and with music by the same. Editing by McKinley Baker. If you like what you've heard and you want to support us, please help us get the word out and recommend this podcast to your friends. Thanks for listening.